G'day, today we're talking tyres. This is again as it relates to Project 6-seater, our N70 4x5 Hilux workmate. And we're looking to change tyres up at the moment. Now I've collected a bunch of tyres in my shed over time. When a cheap pair of tyres comes up, I tend to grab them. So this is a nice little comparison of what, how tyres have changed, how attitudes to tyres and rims might have changed a little bit, and what effect that has on your vehicle and some things you should think about if you're changing tyres. So on the N70 Hilux, that's what we're dealing with today. If you had a workmate or an SR, you rolled on these. These are the standard tyres. They're 16-inch steelies. Now, back in the day when I was doing mechanical work and panel beating work, when someone rolled in on a set of narrow steely rims that were the factory rims and tyre package for VC Commodore or HZ Holden or something, we'd refer to rims like this and tyre packages like this as cheese cutters. The guy's running on cheese cutters. So if I refer to that through the video, you'll know what I'm talking about. So these are the factory tyres that you'll get on an N70 Hilux 4x4 in SR or in workmate. They're the same rim and tyre. These are the standard tyres you'll get on an N80 Hilux, the current generation, in SR 4x4. These are obviously different, a lot bigger. So these are these tyres from the N70 SR, these from the N80 SR. You can see that not quite, but almost the full stack of 4. And these tyres are brand new. They've got delivery Ks on them only. These have got a little bit more wear, but not much off delivery Ks. They've got a little bit more, but anyway, you get the idea. Same tyre, same basic tread pattern, and 4 of these are basically the same width as 3 of these. So they're a lot narrower. They also have a lower profile. These are 205 R16s. Now, if you go, you've left a number out there. No, that's actually the stamp tyre size, 205 R16. Now, in terms of the profile size, it's basically like a 205 8016. That's what these are. But 205 R16 is the tyre size. These are 265s. What are they? 265 65 17s. And these sit higher. So when you put these on the Hilux, 100 kilometers, bang on 100 kilometers is about 105 on the dash. If you put these on it, 100 kilometers an hour is about 97 on the dash. So the higher overall tyre height alters the speedo and makes so you've got to adjust your speedo on the GPS. So if you run on these and you're running 100 kilometers an hour, bang on, so 100 on the dash, you'll be sitting at about 96, 95, and you won't get a speeding ticket. But if you sat on 100 with these, you would be speeding, and if you got a police officer who was particularly pedantic, you might end up with a fine. Probably unlikely, but you may. So what the big reason that people will probably change their tyres over, absent something like they've got doing some serious off-roading or something, the principal reason they'll change their tyres out, things like cost. They want tread pattern. They don't want highway terrain. They want to go to an all-terrain or something. Things like that. They'll be, they want to put a set of different rims on them, so they've got to move to a different tyre size. They want to, they want wider tyres, narrower tyres, different things like that. But there are a couple of things that you want to think about going narrow over skinny. There's some advantages of a skinny tyre. There are some advantages, and there's some disadvantages as well. The biggest problem with these skinny tyres, I've got cheese cutters on the Hilux workmate, same size as this, but they're jewelers, so they've got a slightly different, these are jewelers as well, but these are jeweler HTs, I think. HTs are jeweler HTs, whereas I've got jeweler ATs in this same size on the Hilux at the moment. And when you look at them from the front, if you look down and see the tyre, they look a bit ridiculous. They're really narrow. But on the Hilux N70s in SR and workmate, they didn't come with fender flares. And if you put these rims on them, or the SR5 rims on them, they'll hang out of the guards. Now, the reason that they'll hang out of the guards is because the offset, so these are off the current one, the current Hilux. The offset for this rim is different to this rim. This rim isn't dished and this rim is. And the Hilux SR5 rims in the N70, they also are a different offset. So because of the different offset, that means you can run a 265 like this, which the SR5s ran 265s, and that allows you, that moves the rim out a little bit so you don't scrub on the inner guard when you turn full lock. And that's how you can run a wider tyre, and it's also why the SR5s needed fender flares. Whereas putting these on an N70 without fender flares, they actually hang out of the guards, not by much, but they do stick out of the guards just a little bit. You can look down the profile and you see they are sticking out a little bit. And if you're running down a dirt road, that means you're going to throw muck all over your ute because your tyres are sticking right out on the edge of your guards. So, you know, but from an aesthetics point of view, from an appearance point of view, these tyres look ridiculous. They look so skinny, so small. You just look like, well, that's a cheapo factory tyre. But there are a couple. So from an appearance point of view, not so good. Advantages of the skinnier tyre, though. The principal one. Let's get this out of the way up front. Fuel economy. You know, I've been running. I ran these down to Melbourne just last month. And I've literally come back 2 days ago from another trip to Melbourne, same route. I ran these on the first trip. We were in winter, so no AC running. I ran these on the first trip and I got about 11.5 litres per 100 kilometres. That's calculating it at the end of each tank fill, working out, resetting the odometer, working it out on the calculator. These came out at about 11.5. These running on the last trip, so not these actual tyres, the all-terrains in this stud pattern, in this tyre size. Just got back and that ran at 8.8. So that is a huge difference. That's 2.7 litres per 100 kilometres. That's a massive difference, absolutely massive difference. And with fuel prices the way they are at the moment, that's not to be underestimated. That's actually quite a lot of money. So even if we ratchet it back a little bit, to say a 2 litre per 100 kilometre difference on my Hilux between this tyre and this tyre, then over the course of the year I'm doing about 25,000 Ks a year. So then I'm going to use roughly about 500. That's about 500 litres. If I say there's 2 litres per 100 kilometres between this tyre and this tyre, there's roughly, let's say we just got 2.7, we'll bring it down to 2. So there's 2 litres per 100 kilometres between this tyre and this tyre, over 25,000 Ks roughly, plus or minus, that I do every year. At $2 a litre, for argument's sake, given current petrol prices, that's $1,000 a year, per year. So you might go, it's only $1,000 a year, it's not so big, it's not a big deal. Well, if you kept your vehicle for 5 years and did 100,000 Ks, that's $5,000 over the life of the vehicle. That's quite significant. That's enough to buy a whole new set of tyres every single year, basically, in your fuel savings. So when you're looking at fuel economy, and the reason this comes up is I was talking to a friend of mine just recently who's put bigger tyres on their Navara at some point and lamenting how the fuel economy is not as good as it, he's actually calculated it out now. The fuel is more expensive, diesel's more expensive than it used to be. And he worked it out and went, geez, the fuel economy's gone to custard. And I'm like, yeah, well, you're running massive tyres. The difference between this and a 205, this to a 265, it's not quite, but it's almost 30% flat. That's a massive difference in tyre width, absolutely huge. And that's why that additional mechanical drag, makes a difference on your fuel economy. That's just how it's going to be. So that's the big advantage of running a skinnier tyre. That's straight out of the box. Other advantage, technically, if you are, off-road and you're running an all-terrain or a mud-terrain tread pattern on a 205, technically a narrow tyre will bite in sooner, okay? It will bite in sooner. And so if you can extricate yourself from, a place that's a bit boggy by that tyre biting in sooner, then happy days, you might get out. But overall, not many people running narrower tyres for off-roading, they'll go for a wider tyre. But technically it is true, the same thing with like running tracks on your skid steer. A narrower track will bite in sooner, but if you're driving over ground, and the same is true in in the Hilux is you're putting more weight on a narrower surface area. So if you're driving across lawn, for example, in really wet conditions like this winter, you might be leaving, tyre marks anyway. No matter which way you do it, you drive across grass on somebody's lawn to back something in, or your own lawn, you'll leave tyre marks probably if the ground's really wet. But the tyre indentation on your lawn will be deeper with these than these. And the reason is because, again, they're gripping in sooner because there's more weight on less width. So that's going to put more compaction down. And that might mean you grip and get out of somewhere that might slip with a wider tyre, perhaps, briefly. But you're going to leave a greater indentation. If you break that crust and get into slop underneath where you can't get traction, you'll dig yourself a hole real quick. The flotation is less on a narrower tyre for obvious reasons, because you just don't have that surface area for all that weight of the vehicle pushing down onto the whatever road surface or surface you're driving on. You've got more weight on a narrow area, so you're going to have less flotation. So, but technically it will grip in sooner. So this throws over to the advantages of the larger tyre. Larger tyre will give you greater flotation, you'll have less compaction, and you will have a larger surface area for grip. So most people, if they're doing four-wheel driving, they will go to a wider tyre. That'll be the first thing they do. Now it is true that with that larger flotation you won't grip in just as quick as with a narrower tyre, but that's, in terms of off-roading, that's a very marginal benefit you're probably unlikely to see regularly. So people will go to a larger tyre to improve their grip. Larger surface area with all that weight going onto a 30% difference between this and this, that's quite significant when you've got 2 tons of vehicle pushing down. Other advantages are you're probably going to have a lot more choices if you go wider. The 205R16, there's a few different choices in tyre brands making different tyre choices. This Bridgestone have a bunch of different. They've got the highway terrain like this. They've got got a couple of different options in all terrain, and they also have a Firestone all terrain pattern. But once you jump over to something like this, you've got or even on a 16-inch rim, you start widening out your tyres to a 245 or a 265 or a 275 or a 285, assuming that your rim can take that additional width. You've got a situation where your tyre choices are going to be a lot broader. So for example, if you just had to have a Cooper all-terrain or a Cooper tyre, and you wanted to replace the factory tyre with a factory tyre size, 205R16, you can't get that. Cooper doesn't make that size. But they will make the same profile in a wider width, so overall your rolling diameter is the same, but you're just going wider in a 16-inch, and you can get a Cooper tyre. So there's a lot more choices if you're willing to change your widths, and you can get into mud terrain options on something like this are pretty scanty if you can find one. Whereas when you jump out to here, lots and lots of different options from lots of different manufacturers, BF Goodrich, Coopers as I mentioned, Bridgestone, and then the cheap brands underneath that as well. The Geolanders, you can find them in sizes like this. So if you change your tyre widths, you're going to get a lot more options in tyres. But then the downside is your rolling resistance on the road is going to increase, and you're going to your fuel economy is going to go up. So you have to decide whether that's worth it to you. So for me, because I've got a few different tyres in the shed, in summertime I can quite happily roll on these. I'm not going to get bogged where I live unless we have a really, really wet summer and I'm going across paddocks. If we have a wet summer, that's no good. But if we have a typical summer where it's dry, the roads are, they might be rough, but they're hard, bogging is not going to be a problem. I could roll on these quite happily for pretty much every single thing that I do around the farm and driving and commuting, and I'm going to save some money on my on the fuel. But and then in winter time, if I was worried about it, I could jump into it doesn't take long to change your 4 tyres over, and I've got room to store them, which is a benefit that I have, I guess. But I could change them over to something like this in winter time if I'm worried about getting bogged, and give myself that larger profile. But if aesthetics are important to you, if looking at the vehicle and you want a vehicle that looks really good, you know, you might disagree, but personal opinion, I think a wider tyre and a bigger rim, you know, nearly always looks better. These are not very impressive to look at. You can even paint those rims black, in a gloss black or something, or chrome them, trying to pretty them up. Those tires, you know, even if you put these tires on an alloy rim, they're still not flash. So look, aesthetically they're not so great, but fuel economy, it depends on what it's worth to you. But you know, if you're just running bigger rims purely for appearance's sake, which lots of people do, you know, they'll get their car from factory delivery and go, you know what, take these off, put some really aggressive mud terrains or all terrains on it, bigger rims, aftermarket rims, I want to customize it. Hey, that's fine. But if you're going in something like my unit, an N70, you're going from something like this to something like this or wider, you will be able to measure the cost that you're paying for that look, you know, circa $1,000 a year, depending on how many kilometers you're doing. It will alter your fuel economy. So it's something to keep in mind. So horses for courses, do what you will. At the moment, Project Hilux is riding on a tyre like this, but I am putting fender flares on it as part of our build so that I can run wider tyres when I want to. But the reality is I'll probably end up swapping tyres. Like if I go to Melbourne from here, it's 1,000 kilometres, and you know, for the savings in fuel economy, even if they look silly, it's worth me changing over to something like this and rolling down to Melbourne, coming back, worst case scenario, spending 10 minutes and swapping over the rims, then putting wider ones on. So worth considering, and it does have real impacts on your, you know, on not just how the vehicle looks, but also what your vehicle is going to cost you to run. So I hope this was useful. It's not an exhaustive look at tyres and tyre choices, but a couple of things to get you started, particularly in this high fuel environment where people are looking to save a few bob. Good way to save some money on your 4x4 utility, if you're not going off-road anytime soon, is to go to a smaller tyre. Hope this was useful for you. Thanks for watching.